Welcome, everyone, to the Wired for Wonder podcast. My name is Lori Kirkland, and today I have the pleasure of having John Johnson from Patmos meet with us and be a guest on our show today. John, you want to give a little introduction of yourself?
Hey, Lori, I'm John. I am founder of Patmos hosting tech company dedicated to promoting freedom of the human person. So there's a weird movement afoot. If you've noticed in the world lately that technology is sort of ever encroaching, taking over our lives in many ways. You know, if it's free, you're the product, and you feel yourself being the product. So we started Patmos to sort of provide a safe haven for humans in an increasingly technocratic world, and that's me. I'm a husband, father of 7 young kids. Love a lot of things, and freedom's up there on the list.
Awesome. That's great. And that really aligns with where Deep Human X is that we are also about, right? How do we get out of the cog in the wheel feeling that so many of us have when dealing with technology in the corporate workplace? And how do we actually start bringing back the human skills that make work enjoyable, that make our lives enjoyable, that allow us to fulfill our purpose and, right, do great things in the world through the corporate workplace?
Yeah. When you gave me the pitch for your podcast, I was like, okay, this is something worth doing because wonder and the human connection within work, I think, are two things that are sorely lacking today. And we sort of suffer from a sterility that grinds us down. And I do. I think your work is really important in this. So I'm excited to see what comes of it.
Yeah, me too. And I think that, part of the reason for starting our company, I think just like you, right, there was a big drive and passion for me when I was watching people at a corporate workplace. I don't want to say do soul sucking work, but it was taking things away from people, right? Like it feels like some of the tasks that we have people do are more for the sake of activity rather than the sake of really embracing, right, work to make great things for humanity. So just to give the audience a little bit of understanding, I'd love for you to kind of set the scene of what you're doing at Patmos and then also really talk about, with your passion about freedom, how do you define self-leadership and what do you do to really make an impact on the world?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm kind of an oddball. Have you ever seen the show Severance by chance?
Oh, I love Severance.
Okay.
In the second season now.
So then you'll get the reference. But Severance is an example of work-life balance. And that's a work-life balance. I'm going to throw a little grenade into the conversation here. It's a terrible thing. Like, I don't want a work-life balance. And I don't want employees who have a work-life balance. And that doesn't mean that there's no time for family or things that are more important than work, because there's plenty of things that are way more important than work. But what it does mean is that every person who comes to work, and frankly, life's too short to have a job where you have to bifurcate yourself, right? So for those in your audience who haven't seen Severance, you get a chip in your brain and you go up a magic elevator or down a magic elevator, and it basically makes you this different person. You've totally bifurcated memories, personalities. You have to be a certain work self, and then you have a certain human self, personal self, whatever. And I think that that's a wrong turn that the culture's taken with corporate stuff in the last 20, 30 years. And so I'm a big proponent of bringing your whole self to work and bringing your whole self home, and often recognizing the subordination that the work life has to the home life. But those don't have to be two separate lives. You want to be working in a place where you're free to be completely you and treasured as you, not just tolerated as you, and loved, right? And you want to love your work. And you want the same thing from your family at home that you have at your work. And it's not to say that your work is your family, because I can't fire my family, can't fire my wife. Don't ever try that. But I can't fire an employee. So it's a little bit different. But at the same time, every employee who works at Patmos should be free to be themselves completely, 100%. And I think that's a little bit novel, especially in technology companies where you got to toe certain political or ideological lines. And you're welcome to bring your political, ideological lines to Patmos. It's not sterile at all. You can talk about it all you want. But you're going to be loved and treasured and judged on the quality of your work, regardless of anything personal that you bring in, because we try to eliminate that line in as healthy and legal a way as possible. So it's a strange place to work. It's totally not for everybody. But I was just thinking about that as you asked your question, and now I totally forgot what your question was because I started ranting about severance. So ask me something
That's
else.
okay. I think you're dialing in on something that I'm really passionate about as well, is like, why do we, where along the lines, like, it's almost like we took the I'm a Michigan girl, so I'm going to go back to Henry
Yeah, yeah.
Ford. It's all about cars in my world. Like, it's almost like we took the production line thinking that was supposed to make things easier for humans, and we're like, let's forget the human component and make work and getting money the focus. And we've really just been leading like that. And our, like, companies have models of operation that really line up to that. And it's led to this almost falsehood of that's not professional, or you can't have emotions at work, or you can't bring your whole self. And the truth is like, as human beings, we are wired to connect. We're wired to fill a greater purpose, right? Whatever that's, if you look at all the neuroscience research on happiness and cognitive science, it all says like, no, humans want to make a contribution. But somehow along the way, our society has taken that contribution out and said, no, you have to abide by these made up rules, which we know we can't get rid of all of them tomorrow, but I really admire what you're doing in helping propel that, right? That what could the future of work look like, right? If it wasn't a false sense of you do this at work and then you're a whole different person at home, right? Like, what if it was we were all having conversation, having a beer with our friends and having conversations where we were there and actually thinking about solving problems versus just doing activities that we were tasked with.
Completely. And it should be, at least, totally okay to bring your full personality to work. Moreover, it should be okay for companies to have missions that transcend mundane corporate activity, right? In fact, the best companies are the ones with the most powerful missions, right? To sort of point to something and seek something higher than themselves. And I think we've lost that totally. There was a great book that I just burned through this book by Alex Karp called The Technological Republic. He's a CEO of Palantir. But anyway, you should totally read it if you haven't. But
I will, yeah.
Yeah, you would just love it. Maybe you could interview one of the authors. There's two of them. But anyway, yeah, he reminds us that companies that have sort of forsaken higher purposes, they've just kind of lost their impact, right? They have created this sort of sterile culture of amusement that's lost any meaning or importance or any real global power to change things for the good. It's like it needs to be okay. It needs to be okay to talk about transcendent value, like of things that are really, really important, even if those things have a spiritual dimension to them, or even an anthropological dimension. Like, what is a human person? We're right up against this AI thing that's changing the way we do everything, right? AI is going to change a whole lot, and nobody's really asking. Everybody's asking the questions about how AI can be useful, right? How can I do research on a report for AI? How can I make a PowerPoint presentation with AI? How can I use AI to replace certain human functions and create greater efficiency in my business? Those are like really good questions, okay? But nobody's asking the fundamental question of what should the relationship between the human and the machine be, except for in science fiction and apocalyptic, Terminator kind of stuff, or the Matrix, right? This stuff's all in the back of our mind, but we're not really talking about it. We're too excited about how we can use something. And that's a really dangerous place to be. Like, you wouldn't want to be in a room with 10 people who were thinking about nothing other than how they could use Lori, right?
Yeah.
Right? The utilitarian mindset is...
Isn't that kind of where we're at like, after the pandemic? I feel like that's where a lot of the workforce is today, right?
That's exactly
like, we're
where we're at.
seeing...
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, people are like, okay, you're treating me like I can be replaced. and you're replacing me, right? We see the layoffs and hire back and layoffs, and right, that is like a repeated model. And it's like people, the whole world got a reset after the pandemic.
Yes.
And instead of saying, what did we learn and what do we value, and put our views to something that could change and go towards, something good for humanity, we're trying to run the same old playbook and it's not there. So I love what you're thinking, because that is exactly where Deep Human X is playing, is we are like, there's a human and machine equation. And the really big value of having a tool like AI, because it's going to change everything, is if we start thinking, how can it help humanity? How can it help my life? How can it help others? And I don't mean caring for everybody. I mean, let's look at removing some of the unwritten rules that every CEO of a company has to know all the answers, and the strange hierarchical view of, yes, we want leaders, we need leaders. That's a hard job, but how can they use their humanness to actually create a goal or a mission that is bigger than themselves, that then the rest of an organization can align to? And that's where I see the breakdown of what you were talking about, the sterileness of, it's like, well, if this is the mission and it's to make more shareholder profits, that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to fund the music lessons I want to start my band, right? It doesn't have a personal realm for me. Whereas when you go bigger as a leader, there's this opportunity to accelerate and bring the whole company together, versus an us and them mentality of leadership versus workers, or us versus our competition.
Yes, there's a term that's been around for a lot longer than AI has, but it's a very dangerous term, and that's human resources. When we think of humans
Right?
as resources and not persons with transcendent dignity, inexhaustible identity, a name, right, as opposed to a number, we're in really, really big trouble. I just saw something really horrifying, actually, on one of my group texts. It was like a Reddit post about how this person just started questioning their whole company because somebody who had been at the company died, right? And sad thing, tragic thing. And the CEO sent out one email saying, we're sorry, thoughts and prayers are with the family, and let's get back to work, and then they had his position opened up the very same day. And it's kind of terrifying how unimportant we are in a corporate setting, right? And sure, your job isn't the end all and be all. There are much higher, more important, more beautiful things that work should enable, right? By basically paying you to afford other better things. But at the same time, we all know the pain of working in a place where we are commodified and monetized and used without being respected. And I don't mean respect in the sense of like an inspirational poster, on your break room wall, but really, really, really respected. It's a lost art. And what is respect, right? Respect is when anybody in my company, like my physical presence company, not just my company, but anybody who I have the blessing of being able to meet or encounter, I should be able to see in them, even the worst of people, I should be able to see in them the ability to actualize me, like to make me better just by them being in my presence. And to see that in a person is to respect her. And so we don't do that enough as a culture, for sure. And we definitely have lost the art of doing it at work. We view everybody around us as useful, not useful, annoying, pleasant. Like we have these sort of categories for people. I'm guilty of it too, right?
Oh, we all do that, right? It's the way we
right?
have to, based on our own personal patterns, it's how we survive these moments of friction that we're having. But let me ask you this, because this is such a good topic. Where do you think the fear came from the leaders, right? To, like you gave that example of the CEO, right? Who kind of brushed things under. You hear also, I came from a Fortune 500 company that we have all sorts of HR training around, like you said, not the people, but the tactical skills of human resource of right what you're supposed to do as a machine employee, instead of just as a person. And I feel like one of the things is that there's no pointing fingers. People say things like have the best intentions, but then when something comes up, a point of friction comes up, it's almost like it's brushed under the carpet, because people are somehow afraid that even though they're a human being and their rest of their entire lives at work, like they can't be. And they're like, I don't know what they think, but it feels like any emotions, any upset, any friction that comes, instead of using our human skills to be like, okay, how do we work through this to make an outcome for everyone, right? And it doesn't mean everyone gets their choice. It means an outcome for the whole group, versus leaders who, I don't want to say it's lazy leadership, but it is a little bit, when it's like, okay, let's just pretend that didn't happen. And then all that yuckiness is left with the other employees to pick up as a leader is moving forward. Any thoughts on that scenario?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. And it's a very good question. There are many good answers, I think. But one thing that sticks out to me is that what you're describing, it is lazy leadership, but it's also really fearful leadership. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the Silicon Valley as a case study, it started with really noble, aspirational intentions. Steve Jobs is a great example of a guy who came along and wanted to do things beautifully, simply, elegantly, and daringly, right? Like the guy was a renegade. But as the Valley got, hyped, dot-com bubble, et cetera, right? And grew, not just hyped, but really, really grew as a massive power and profit center in the capital markets and cultural markets. The power automatically becomes very, very concentrated. And so now we're all aware of, the four companies that sort of dominate our whole lives in many ways. And in many ways, we're living in a technocracy with those four companies dictating so much of things that we notice and don't notice all day long, right? And when power becomes so centralized, not just among corporate monopolies, but among political powers, it's kind of dangerous, because when that power becomes so centralized, you have to toe the line, you have to support the message, whatever the message might be, and anything that deviates from that is a potential threat to your power. So you have to sort of suck away, vacate any human element that might sort of introduce a certain dynamism that could change things, right? So technocracy by its nature is stagnant. It has to be stagnant to keep its power, because the only thing that sort of changes power dynamics is revolution or beauty, right, or tragedy. But all these things are not status quo. So when the tech world started, right, you had people daring to do things really, really differently. And now everybody just wants to do things really, really the same. Everything from the way that you raise money, the VCs that you have to suck up to, the people you have to hire, the products that you have to cultivate. So what happened? A lot of Silicon Valley companies just took the safe route, right? And you have these kids of the 80s and 90s, all of us trophy babies who, got the trophy for being on the last place soccer team and the pizza party and everything. And it created this really easy path to success. It's like video game success, like you just saved a princess from a castle and killed a dragon, but you were just pushing buttons, in front of a screen, and you got the dopamine hit of victory anyway. So what happened? These kids, like my generation, they grew up and they founded these tech companies that dominate our lives, but they're basically toys, right? They're for the purposes of amusement, attention, social media phenomenon, like Zuckerberg's a great example. And these are they're very powerful things. Like they have potential to, build economies, right? They are economies in themselves, but they're not really impactful in a human way, except for the fact that they just take a lot of our time and attention and sort of dominate our thought. So it's a danger, but I think that's precisely why, one, the power concentration has to move. That's why we founded our company. I'm in California right now. I live in California, right? But I very deliberately founded a company in Missouri, right? I could have done it in the Silicon Valley. I did it in the Silicon Prairie, because you got to get away from the old guard. And two, you have to be willing to grow your company differently, especially in a tech company. We've gone from like 0 to 70 employees in 3 years, and I've never raised an ounce of outside capital from a VC fund in our whole company's history. And I did it in the most capital-intensive industry the world's probably ever seen, right? The hosting. And the
Very competitive.
Very competitive and very expensive to compete in. And so the whole history of Patmos is like people telling me you can't do it that way. It's crazy. Like it'll just never work. And I love hearing that. That's like that's just music to my ears. Every time somebody tells me you can't do it that way, I just say, watch me. And I'm not like bragging about my audacity, not at all. But to do something good in technology these days, and I mean good in a very strict sense, you have to do things very, very differently. And you have to take risks that seem very, very uncomfortable to the guy who's just in it to create an amusing product and then flip it for $1 billion to the big fish. That's not what
you are so refreshing in a world. I'm going to share with you. I just went to an AI conference this week in Vegas. That was great, but I was like stunned and shocked at how little actual progress had been made. It was like where the corporate world is, and in the last year, which if you understand AI, right, it is offering the ability to do so much stuff. And literally, like when you were talking about the big four and the processes that, they run, like there's just a whole lot of ways to automate that, be done with that, but be working on bigger things. And instead, I was actually pretty surprised with the select few companies that actually had made a bigger jump, because most people felt very comfortable working with, well, this is the next step. This is what Google is saying. This is what Facebook is saying, right? Bless them, like it's great to follow that pathway, but it feels like there's a really big missed opportunity with what AI can actually bring. And I think you touched on some of the fear of it, right? Which is a kind of a fear-based leadership, but then also the power structure of it, right? Like, oh, this feels like the easier path. And I loved your video game analogy, because I actually hadn't ever heard that before, of like, oh yeah, I do this, these 3 steps to get this jump, right? Like that is exactly what it feels like. So I love that. But then I question, like, how did we as humanity get to the place where it felt like we, at least in America, right? We built up this country to have, a more freedoms, more, individual thinking, right? And then we've kind of pushed against big government, but at the same time, then we're putting all the power into corporations. So it's almost like mimicking what our country was founded on to go into corporations. And I see now that it feels like a lot of people are putting their power into the corporation, and the tech giants are also saying, I don't really want this power. Like, why are you asking me about everything in life? Like, I'm a tech creator. So it's annoying everyone who uses the systems, and it's annoying the tech leaders. And it's like across the board, we all have this frustration, yet there's a fear for people to move forward and to step into that. So knowing where you came from and where you're at, and you think about the changes AI are going to bring, what do you think are some of the things that professionals need to be thinking about to ensure that they remain relevant and valuable in the workforce as changes do come up?
Oh, that's a big question. I'll try. I think the companies that constitute the big 4 or 5 or 6, 7 companies, whatever, they got famous being disruptors, and the power that came with that victory. It's like Bane says in the Christopher Nolan Batman movie, victory has defeated you. The power that came with that victory also was accompanied, as I said earlier, by stagnation and ultimately laziness. So that disruption becomes the enemy instead of the catalyst. And so I think that it's almost a trope to say, this phrase, paradigm shift, disruption, all these things are just totally overplayed. But there is a whole lot of truth in that the companies that do things really, really differently and buck the traditional wisdom of the corporate VC rat race, but especially the way that these companies treat humans, will be the defining factor that will sort of propel the next generation of victorious technology companies. I'm happy to name names like AWS. Sure, they're a competitor of ours. We think so. They don't know who we are, I'm sure. AWS has 419 data centers, right? And Patmos only has 4. But then I think, well, AWS only has 419 data centers. Like, it's not infinity. It's not 10,000. It's 419. And so we're like 400 and do the math, 400 and something away from that, right?
It's tangible. It's within reach, right? It gives you some place to go to be like, that's not extraordinary.
It is within reach. Yeah, it's almost kind of easy, actually. I mean, it sounds strange, but I don't know. Maybe it's like I'm a weird thinker, but like, money's so easy to make. Businesses are so easy to grow. Like, it's hard work. It's challenging, but there are much harder things in life than starting a business that becomes successful. It's not like, it's just business, right? As they say. So, and I also think, like I said, the defining factor that could challenge the corporate technocracy, the monopolies, the status quo, whatever, is the way that humans are treated. Amazon, for instance, is notoriously, I guess, trying, but, the drivers who deliver my Prime presents on Christmas still have to pee in a Gatorade bottle instead of being able to take a break, right? There's a real sense
and all their time is tracked, right?
And all their time is tracked because they are but numbers, sort of fit for use and then deletion, ultimately. And I think that, again, at its best, the Silicon Valley did a great job of sharing the wealth with their employees. Like, the whole model of stock ownership and stock options, like, that's kind of revolutionary, right? That's a good spirit. It's like, hey, we're going to build something great, and if you build it with us, you're going to get a chunk of this company. And that's awesome. But at the same time, power's become way too concentrated. I think Peter Thiel famously said there's only 2 kinds of companies: those who have monopolies and pretend not to, and those who don't have monopolies and pretend to. And and right there and I guess Patmos wouldn't fit in that category because I don't think I claim a monopoly. In all honesty, we do certain things really, really well, but we've got a long way to go. But I think that as these huge companies try to do little but defend their monopolies, even against their own culture, like the thousands and thousands of humans that they employ, it's kind of doomed to implode, and I think it'll implode really, really quickly.
So I'm with you there. That's where Deep Human X, again, why we're focusing on the human side, is because we don't think that disruption is that far off. Like, it, with as fast as the technology is able to help people, it's going to be about those who have the imagination and the thinking and use. We are human beings, right? We're wired. We have left and right brain. Your left brain is your analytical, very ordered side of your brain, but your right brain, which is our kind of newest evolution, and they're both always working, is all about holistic thinking, creative thinking, imagination, like looking outside of the box. And so when you talk about that disruption, I believe it's not that far away either. And I like your thoughts on money are refreshing. There's a whole bunch of money to be made. It's just a matter of who's going to be creative enough to make it. Right. And then are you willing to risk, the opportunity that's really in front of every single person right now with the changes AI are going to bring?
Yeah. Money's super easy to make if you don't really care too much about it. That's
Yeah,
the
well,
secret.
it's an energy exchange, right? And that's not
It
somehow
is.
we've gotten most of our society to think that you're lucky to get money when you're like, no, 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 money's supposed to fund the rest of your life, what you want to do, right? It's your avenue to do things, but it's not your worth or your value. I mean,
Yeah,
at least
yeah.
that's my opinion.
That's right. And the same could be said of a company, not just a person. Like few things break my heart more than seeing on LinkedIn a founder of a tech company celebrating a round of VC that he just closed. It's terrifying to me to see these kids saying, "Oh, congrats, everybody, congrats on closing your $8 million round. You just lost 60% of your company, and you're slated to lose another 60% of what you have left when you raise your next round and your next round. And all the
Yep.
while, you're getting your cash. Okay, good. Enjoy your 18-month runway. Cute, right? Enjoy your runway. Enjoy your cash, because you just sold your mission and the very thing that you want, unless you got in it to flip it. Maybe you did. Maybe a lot of people do that, and there's really nothing wrong with it, except for you're forsaking the impact that your company can have. Because you remember the old Roman dictum, right? He who pays rules. You give over, you take your money from anybody, you're owned by them. So you
Yep.
really compromise your mission when you sell so much of your company so early. And that shouldn't be the way it's done, right? Because that
And it
whole
doesn't, you
system.
don't need that much capital with AI anymore. Like it's literally cutting down on I mean, there's just so many ways to cut down costs of initial investment. So hopefully anyone who's thinking of starting a company, like, yeah, I agree with you.
In
Like
many
the
ways,
VCs
yes.
are
But then the
absolutely great.
question is, yeah, the question becomes who owns the AI. So AI at its like most fundamental level, mechanically, is very, very, very expensive. Running these basically $350,000 computers that you can fit in a briefcase, but suck the amount of power that like 3 houses do in a day every hour.
Yep.
And the facilities to cool those machines and the power that has to be generated, it's extremely capital intensive. And that is actually a problem that needs to be addressed, is that we're sort of out of electricity. And so,
Yeah.
and these machines require a whole lot of it, and they require a whole lot of cash to operate and operate safely. So yeah, that's for sure an issue. But I wanted to get back to one thing you said before I forget. And it's the way that these companies can differentiate. We have to go back to a philosophical understanding of the human person. If we're talking about artificial intelligence without talking about authentic intelligence, we're just messing around, or we're making severe wrong turns that are going to hurt us in a big way. I was watching this video with Sam Altman, the OpenAI guy, and he's like talking about the latest and greatest GPT 4 point whatever, and his engineers are alongside of him telling how it's, we're so much closer to AGI, right? We're so much closer to singularity. And what struck me is that watching these kids talk about epistemology is like watching a bunch of the world's greatest lawyers trying to perform open heart surgery.
I don't think I know what epistemology is.
Okay, good. Epistemology is the study of knowing. How do we know things at all? So this is an issue, is that we have these technocrats trying to really punch above their weight class into a higher science. Philosophy, epistemology, these things are all much higher than engineering, because they concern
Yes.
higher things and higher causes and first causes. So if we're talking about building machines that can completely and perfectly imitate human thought, human speech, without being able to have a good discussion about what human thought and human speech actually is, it's very futile and almost comical. And that's what I mean by, it's like you'd have the best lawyers in the room and say, okay, go perform open heart surgery, go perform brain surgery. it would be a mess to watch.
Oh my God, John, I did not realize like how in sync we are. So, right, probably the thing I nerd out on most is thinking about thinking. And so
Oh,
I just
you're an
concur with you. I'm
epistemologist,
like,
Lori.
right? I
Yes,
didn't
you
even
didn't
know
even know
that.
it.
Look what I'm learning about
You need to put,
myself. But
put that on your
I
LinkedIn
like
profile. Lori Kirkland, epistemologist.
I think I'm going to now, right? Like that. I mean, that's exactly what having been in the tech space for so long. Um, like that's one of the things that I'm like looking at is I'm like I have worked with absolutely brilliant engineers, CTOs, great companies, amazing CEOs, business leaders, but there that separation of what you can build versus how you build it. Like AI is disintegrating that need for there to be a separation because we actually have fulfilled from the tech side on the promise of it. But now what we need is people who are thinking about, right? If 50% of your workforce has their time free, right? What are the things that you value that you're going to, as a leader, going to fill up their time with, right? What are the things that you value as a human? What are the things that society values as a human? And that really does become easier and clearer if you start looking at how does your thinking patterns keep you trapped in a way of thinking versus what is possible, right? So to add to what you were saying, or to just kind of, I guess, say right on, brother, that is like, I'm right there with you of we need, there's just a big call for leaders to be saying, what do we want to do? We are at this great change in humanity, to go to the philosophical side, and what are we going to do with it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what do we
To
want to
synthesize
fill the time with?
to synthesize that sentiment, we are now more than ever in need of philosophers. You think of philosophers as like the most useless profession, and it is useless because you can't really, you can't rebuild a carburetor as a philosopher. You can't, diagnose an illness as a philosopher. You can't graft it. You can't graft a fruit tree as a philosopher. So you can't really do anything, but you can ask why, and you can ask how, and you can really understand the final causes that sort of animate all these other subordinate things. But the problem is, and let's just cut to the chase with AI, is that you've got a very small group of technocrats who are attempting to invent their own God. They're attempting to invent something to govern themselves. They're attempting to be...
Are you talking about like AI policy and governance and ethical AI?
Oh, I'm
Or what do
talking about singularity. I mean, Ray Kurzweil famously walks the same path that's the most safe to work every day, right? And he takes all the same vitamins every day. And he's a futurist who's predicted many, many things accurately, like with astounding accuracy. But he is sure that in his lifetime, we will have achieved singularity, meaning he can unite himself fully to a machine and have immortality. That's
I don't know
terrifying.
about the immortality, but I do believe we're going to get rid of a lot of
They've
strength.
made movies about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
You basically upload yourself and live forever. Cute. But it's terrifying. And we know it's terrifying. That's why we make these terrifying movies about it. But it's terrifying because humanity's now at a crossroads where we have to really decide once and for all if we're going to be ruled by and unified with our Creator, or ruled by and unified with our creatures. And it's so much easier to create your own God, right? You can create your own, Pinocchio style, right? And it's counterfeit. It has to be counterfeit because if it's created by you, if it's an artifact, then it's not transcendent. And if it's not transcendent, then it's finite. And if it's finite, it will turn to dust. And
I think you're...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
It's a very scary
I was going to say,
proposition.
you're really bringing out for me.
It's a very scary
So I'm
proposition.
with you at being scary.
Oh, sorry. You go. We got a lag. You go.
You go.
No, you go.
Okay, I'm gonna go. Good. You guys can see that this is live. But no, I think that is this idea of we've made work and life about transactions. And when you really look at the bigger universal picture, right, that the energy, the creator, the bigger picture of what we're all part of, it really does lend itself to say, no, the work that I do like should be in harmony with the bigger picture, not I like how you said the false god, but not these transactional things that right, that devalue the human side of it day after day and erode us as a species, that almost force us more into the creature versus the bigger picture.
Bingo. And
So I know
you don't have to make any theological statements, right? It's not like a religious claim to recognize that you subsist in a whole that is greater than yourself. Like, I did not cause myself to be born. I don't know about you, right? But when I'm trying to...
I'm a miracle.
Yeah, right. We all are, right? This is a miracle, right? Existence is such a gift. And all I know about it is that I didn't cause it. I'm not its source. But the pursuit of AGI, the pursuit of singularity that we are on a crash course for, and we're training ourselves to think like our machines, to be our machines, to elevate machines to the level of human. Lori, I'm going to ask you an honest question. How many times have you said please and thank you to your chat GPT?
Oh my God, so many times.
That should scare you a little
I've
bit.
started finally like being like, that's yucky. Can you change that? I don't like that answer. So I started like, yes, I do say please and thank you.
Why do we
that
feel
is...
a need to be polite to our machines? That's a very strange thing because they're imitating humans. They're counterfeit. We have to deal with artificial intelligence. It's not good. It's not bad. It's a tool, and tools can be good or bad depending on how they're used. But we have to admit that there is a deep susceptibility to these things being counterfeit human persons, right? And when we start interacting with counterfeit human persons so much, we ourselves will ultimately slide into becoming counterfeit ourselves, right?
Which is where, honestly, like, I feel like we're a little bit at right now, right? Like, that's where we're at. So leaders like you, I so appreciate this conversation because your thinking is fresh, your thinking is forward, and it's really based on, I think we have an amazing opportunity. I'm an optimist. Like, let's use AI for the good of humanity and not for more mundane, transactional, boring stuff that we already have, right? Like, let's actually use it as a tool to enhance humanity, not replace humanity. So I'm really excited and glad that you have been on the show. Can I ask you one last question before we go?
Anything.
All right. So what do you think, if, people who are listening, what do you think are the top 3 skills you feel people should be working on to really develop their human skills that they should develop to remain relevant as we see this change happening?
Okay. Education is so important. I have almost an unspoken rule at my company, and I'm not alone in this. Elon Musk, actually, I think he stole it from me, or maybe I stole it from him. I'm not sure, but he says I never hire MBAs, and I almost never hire MBAs. MBAs are basically formed to be totally useless, but to think themselves important. It's really strange. So I have I hire people who graduated from traditional in the strict sense of trivium and quadrivium, which we could get into on another episode, but like old school, great books, liberal arts, people who have educations in philosophy and know how to read books and know how to talk about them. They make the best tech employees you'll ever meet, because when you learn philosophy and traditional liberal arts, you can think. You can think your way out of a wet paper bag. You can think your way into any conversation. You can learn any skill. It's sort of like the generalist skeleton key that can really propel a career. So
Yes.
That's, if you want a tool, that's one, is like find a place where you can learn the liberal arts, and not just like the Swarthmore, like fake liberal arts, like I have a communications degree, that's not what I mean. Liberal arts have a really, really bad rap, but they used to mean something that is, you're liberated, you're free. It's the education of a free human. So become free through education. I don't care where you are in life. It's never too late, but go read Plato, go read Aristotle, learn Euclid, read poetry. If you want to really crush it in tech, and frankly, the technocrats know this, right? Technocrats, the best of the best in Silicon Valley, they don't let their kids anywhere near an iPad, right? They're learning exactly as I'm describing it in many cases. And so don't be afraid to, don't study business in college. That's like, don't study business, don't study communications. Study philosophy, and you get a leg up in the tech world. Just if you do it for no other reason than utilitarian, career, service, whatever, trust me, you thank me later. Other tools, connect yourselves to really, really good people. I have a rule at Patmos that I don't hire anybody I wouldn't like to hang out with and have a beer with at a company offsite, right? I don't hire people whose families I don't want to get to know. Again, not that company is family. It's not. It's not. But you want to connect yourself to people you love. Like, life is way too short to just be tolerated at work, and life is way too short to just tolerate work. We spend so much of our waking life working. You might as well work in a place that you enjoy it, even if it's not the coolest thing on paper or on your resume or whatever. Put yourself in the company of humans you enjoy interacting with. And then third tool is not a tool at all, but just remember that first things have to come first, and always remember the why to your work. You're not working for the sake of your paycheck. You're not living for the sake of work. You're working for the sake of not working, right? Working, like all these tech things we're talking about today, is just a tool. There's a great book I'd recommend by Joseph Pieper, P-I-E-P-E-R, called Leisure, the Basis of Culture. And he really flips on its head this idea that humans should just work for the sake of working or live for the sake of working. Work has to be for an end that's higher than itself, to be noble.
Yes.
Right? And work is so noble. It's so beautiful. Like, humans in their work, it's an expression of their dignity that I think the angels are envious of, because we can build things, we can beautify things, we can go out in our backyard, mow the grass. Like, it's just, wow, just fixed my world here, right? It's like my yard looks so much better, and I just did that. And you can magnify that and scale it, like, throughout building of entire businesses. But you have to remember the reason why you're working. And people who don't remember that, and people who don't know why they're working, companies who don't know why they're doing what they're doing apart from generating quarter by quarter profit, those companies are making the world a really ugly place. And I'm sick and tired of living in a really ugly world. So I don't know, for what that's worth, there you go, 3 tools. How about that?
I love it. John, it has been such a pleasure to meet you. If anyone's listening, where's a good place they can check out more about Patmos?
Patmos.tech. If you need hosting, GPU co-location, we even have a pro services team in Denver that can build any great app or website. And if you want to learn more about the education I was talking about earlier, I founded a nonprofit a few years ago called Albertus Magnus Institute, and that's magnusinstitute.org. You can jump into free online live and interactive classes with a bunch of awesome people who are after the same things as you. So that's magnusinstitute.org, and the tech stuff is patmos.tech.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Lori. Great work.